And we are live. JT here. Welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I just want to take a moment to thank you. Whether you are watching live as we stream into our Facebook community, whether you are catching the replay on YouTube or on Facebook, or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast, thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And what I want to remind you is that the mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. And my challenge to you is to keep your mind wide open. And I guarantee you'll gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will most importantly help you succeed at the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. We've been communicating over social for a little bit and just really wanted to bring him on because I think he will share lots of wisdom with us, lots of lived experience. And I think he offers us a perspective of really how to lead during uncertain times. My guest in the huddle today is the president of Football Canada. He is also the Secretary General for the International Federation of American Football. My guest in the huddle today is Jim Mullin. How are you today, brother?
I'm okay. Let's see. Maybe I should take myself off mute. You got me off mute. I am fantastic. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you thinking about me here.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, Jim, before we get started, I just want to take a moment just to thank you. I'm a firm believer in counting your blessings. And one of the biggest blessings I think that we can give anyone is investing our time and energy, right, into just being with them. So again, I just want to thank you for being able to invest some of your time into energy, into being here with me and our community today.
Well, and thanks very much for that. And I appreciate the investment that you've made, especially in this space on this weekly basis to reach out and build community. Everyone thinks that there's a system or a silver bullet that will solve the problems that our sport faces from day to day. There isn't one. It's communication, community, and bridge building that's going to be the center of aligning what is, in my mind, the greatest sport on earth.
I couldn't agree with you anymore, brother. So I'm really enthused for our conversation. So I'm curious with you. You know, football, sport in general, has played an important role for you and your life. So I'm curious, from your perspective, Jim, is there one lesson that sport has taught you that you find yourself still applying to your life today?
I think that especially through the sport of football, it's the element of teamwork, and it's the element of being elevated by understanding what the person beside you is doing and how you can make them better and how they can make you better. No sport does it better than football, in my mind. And that goes right back to when I was a teenager, quite frankly, playing the game at a very nice low community level. That's the thing that I'd like to see expressed within the game from people of all types and all backgrounds, where you had different personality types in different positional groupings, right? I think anybody that's been associated with the game knows that you're going to get a different personality type on your defensive front in comparison to your O-linemen, in comparison to your backs, your receivers, your defensive backs, and yes, even your kickers and punters. Yeah. So when you take a look at the challenges, like I'm kind of in a coaching position right now, taking a look at the challenges of bringing all these different cultural elements together, I go back to my first exposure to the game and always tap into that discovery as a kid, as a teenager. And I've followed that through different veins and different paths of the sport, and seen how success has been replicated by being able to take all of those diverse groups and aligning them and sending them forward.
I love that, Jim. And I love how everything goes back to, you were mentioning how these goes back to some of the first lessons you learned, right? The grassroots level. And just that ability to be able to be a great teammate, right? And how that is such a foundational skill to success in the game of life. So I'm curious, you stepped into this role as president of Football Canada. Like, I know you'd been involved previously during an interesting time, right? Pre-pandemic. So I'm curious, being a great teammate, right? And I know a big focus is around, this idea of aligning, right? Creating alignment within provinces, within the country. How has that emphasis on being a great teammate really helped drive the vision of creating more alignment within the game and sharing the game, making it more diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
Well, we need to be focused on opportunities and opportunities that provide value to the individuals. And if there's a common sense of value from that opportunity, it's at least my belief that we can align together and pull together and focus in that one direction. I'll give you an ongoing example right now of one of the things that I'm dealing with, to drill into it a little bit. Football Canada, to tell its story, needs to have statistics from its large national tournaments and from its international tournaments. We can't tell a story without having that data. Like, we need to be able to say that Jalen Philpott at a world championship had X amount of catches and did this and did that in this game and had the longest, TD punt return. We need to have all of those things, right? So we're focused on getting a stat system, and getting a stat system for Canadian football is quite unique. So we're out there looking for a stat system. As I have discussions with different conferences within U Sport, with U Sport itself, with the CJFL, they're all looking for the same solution, and they're all doing it by themselves, right? So here we are duplicating effort. We're all looking for value. We're all looking for an answer. Why aren't we all doing it together, right? That's why we had the summit a year and a half ago. Is that where are the opportunities? Where is the focus? Where is the alignment to get more value out of our efforts? Like, why should we have 7 different individuals working on the same thing in different boxes? And that can apply to anything across the board. Like, there's another thing, like in U Sports, they use 2 different footballs.
Yeah.
Right? Like we should all be using the same football. And there's RFPs out there for footballs from all of those groups out there. Now, I'm not to say that PSOs shouldn't go out and find their own suppliers for this or that or the other thing. There's always going to be differences, but when there's some obvious projects out there that we can all work on, that then we can take the resources, and time is a big resource that I don't think we value enough. We can take that time and focus it on other things. That's when we start to win in other areas. That's just one example. I could probably, I know we only have 20 minutes here. I could probably list about 12 examples for you, but that's just one of them.
Well, it's interesting. And what I'm really hearing from you is, being a great teammate is about looking for opportunities, as you mentioned, and I'll sort of add to that, is creating win-win-wins.
Yes.
Yeah. I think of even just yesterday, right, where Football Ontario, we made the announcement of our partnership with Purple Shift, right, which I know is a partnership with Football Canada. And it was just amazing to be able to see, okay, this is great. Most importantly, this is great for our athletes, right? This is giving them, empowering them with tools. But just to be able to see, like, this is going to create a win for athletes. Most importantly, this is going to create wins for coaches, parents, the schools. And you just like, this is like a no-brainer. So I love just kind of what you're going along this lines of, let's work to win the effortless way, right? Let's celebrate this game. Let's grow it together is what I'm hearing.
The purple shift piece is interesting because Micah always came to me and we started discussing what the app was about. But this gets back to his story. So he was telling me his story, right? And his story led to him creating this app. And then I found myself relating to his story because minor football in my particular part of the world of BC was always on life support. It didn't provide the opportunities that it could have to young athletes. It never had enough players, didn't have great coaching, had terrible facilities. One of the reasons I'm doing this today is I want better opportunities for kids I'll never meet and coaches I'll never meet in those situations, right? You want to aspire to a higher level, and you're limited by that community support. Remember, we're talking about community that can get you to that higher level, right? So when Micah related that story to me, it made a lot of sense about what's driving him. I think it's important to understand what drives people. So the other part to this is, if I'm going to have a successful business partnership with Micah, right? And if I understand what's driving him, I'm going to connect him to other stories, right? So in my IFAF role, in my Football Canada role, I get these emails from Benin and Nigeria and kids looking for opportunities, right? So now I've connected Micah with that association in Africa and with that kid in Africa. I said, apply your app here. I'm interested in his growth as much as the growth as it pertains to Football Canada. And I think one of the mistakes that we can make in leadership is just making it about us, just making it about our organization when we bring in outside partners. That's very short-sighted. If we've got someone that can tell a tremendous story about delivering a success story about a 16-year-old kid playing on a dirt field in Nigeria, getting a scholarship either in Canada or the United States through this app, if that's the story there, then that the app that we're working with can apply to any kid in Canada, right? So it's about seeing all those pieces, but also sharing that opportunity, right? There's a lot of faith that you put into people when you share opportunity, and that faith is not always going to be realized. You have to accept that when you invest that faith in people, but sometimes the payoff is tremendous.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, I just think of, my conversations with Micah, right? It's all around opportunity, right? Like, I know a word you mentioned several times is opportunity. I know, listening to, just using Micah's example, he talked about in the huddle about how he just wants to empower people so that they can make the decision, right, of what they want to do with it. And so I love that. So here's, again, being respectful of your time and energy. I guess I'm really curious. We live in a world that's very polarizing these days, right? Like a world that just really wants us to choose sides. So I'm really curious, during times of uncertainty, is there something that we can do, that someone can do to really take that 30,000 foot view, to be objective, to be able to look at a situation from a neutral lens where everyone is saying, no, you have to see this world this way or this way. Like how have you navigated that?
Well, I think I said to you before we were on live, I've gone from being a revolutionary to an incrementalist.
Yeah.
And you talk about 30,000 feet. Like if you're being a revolutionary, you're dropping to zero in a hell of a hurry without a parachute.
Yeah.
So you want that parachute, right? You're talking about parachutes and opening mines. that you open that parachute as you slowly float down. I've done some skydiving, by the way.
Okay.
As you slowly float down, that's where you can gather your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
That metaphor actually means a lot to me, because I have changed my approach, and it changed my thinking to try to gain consensus through dialogue. And you've seen me on social media.
Yeah.
Social media is one of my jobs. One of my jobs in my past was I wrote headlines for a newspaper chain. Right.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons I'm kind of good at Twitter, because 25 years ago, I just wrote headlines in a very small space, right? And had to be efficient with words. So, but headlines don't tell the story, right? So the question is, do we want to put the time in to find solutions and have open minds and kind of open hearts along the way in some cases? Right? Do we want to consider, when someone makes a statement, they may have a story that you can't see that brought them to that point, right? And that there's a road that you can join them on that may take them in a different path. I came up against a number of people that are very confrontational with me in my past within the Football Canada world. They ended up becoming some very good friends along the way, just because you take the time to sit and listen and have a conversation and understand their experience that would get them to that point, right? But I keep mentioning the word time, but that's the thing. You got to be willing to put the time in. Social media does not demand that you put the time in.
Yeah.
So social media is a burp or a hiccup of a thought. It's hit and run. It's endorphin churning. It's all of those things that actually don't create thoughtful dialogue. It's dialogue. There are ways that you can approach it where it can open some minds, but eventually you're in a binary world, and in the binary world, you're either a 1 or a 0. and that's what's forced us to this black and white choice, when really the world is about the gray area. Like we're all hypocrites. Like there's something that we can take a stand on in one situation. There's another situation. It's like, but you did that over there, right? So we have to understand situation by situation and person by person. We have to understand that we need to have those discussions before we have an understanding. That's a long walk again, JT. I apologize for that.
Oh, you know what? It's what I really heard from you, Jim, again, is one of the mantras I do my best to live by into daily practice is keep it simple. Mm-hmm. And what I really heard from you was this idea of learning to ask questions from a place of curiosity, mm-hmm. right? Instead of judgment. And the judgment piece, I think for many of us is, right, it can be easy. But what if we really started to invest, like you said, time and energy and really asking questions and, figuring out what drives people, what makes people tick, what their stories are. And that's how you build bridges. And once you build bridges, that's how you bring communities together, as cliche as it is.
Yeah. And everyone around a table that is volunteering their time and volunteering their focus and effort does represent a constituency. Even if that voice sounds like it's off the ranch somewhere, they represent a certain number of people within your organization, and you have to understand what their motivation is. And there may be lessons that you haven't discovered in that motivation, that there may be lessons that help you avoid making the mistakes of the past, right? Yeah. So while we're rushing towards new ideas in the information age, there's some analog lessons out there, I think, for all of us that are worth taking the time to study and balancing it against the challenges that we have today and in the future.
Well, I think it's a great reminder, right? As again, to stop and smell the proverbial roses, right? To really be in the here and the now. Right? Okay. So, brother, I got one last question for you. Again, want to be respectful of your time and energy. What's your hope, like in terms of like what would 10xing your vision, right? You've talked a lot about alignment. If I said to you, 30 seconds to a minute, what would you love to see moving forward as the leader, as the president of Football Canada?
Well, I'd like to see U Sports, CJFL, and Football Canada at the high performance level moving together in an aligned fashion on things. The idea that the Vanier Cup and the Canadian Bowl were being played at the same time this year was inexcusable in my opinion. People need to be in communication and be aware, like we're in the sport. That's your teammate. Be aware of what your teammate's doing. Someone was offside there, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be in alignment in how we present ourselves and how we do business.
Yeah.
That feeds into proprietary events that we need to create for Football Canada to be a successful organization. I addressed the CFL presidents and their management council last week, along with Aaron Giesler from Football Ontario, on the merits of our first down program and getting kids age 4 to 8 involved. I've got feedback from some of the teams. I would like to see every team in the CFL running this program to create that initial bond with football and get kids into the system. We have two things that we need to focus on. They are related: grassroots at that very youngest level and high performance at that oldest level. Those two things. Everything else is filled in by our provincial partners in those associations. But those two things, I'd like to see some renewed effort and energy and focus around those things so we can reset the sport as we come out of this pandemic. It is going to take a lot of work. If you're not willing to roll up your sleeves with me, step aside.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great reminder, right? And one thing I often try to share is it's easy to talk about change.
Yeah.
It's another thing to be the change, right? To truly embody and demonstrate, to, like you said, roll up your sleeves and willing to sort of walk through the mucky water. So,
well, and don't be afraid of trial and error as well, because we've had to do that through the pandemic. We've had stops and starts all over the place. Yeah. So, let's throw ideas out there. Let's spend the time to at least explore ideas out there to try to advance the sport. And you need to be inventive when you're dealing with the geography that Canada presents you and the costs that are involved with it as well. So don't be afraid to explore new ideas. The way you did it before may have some value, but you may have to reinvent your approach coming out of that. So
definitely. So, brother, I just really, Jim, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for, the man you are, the great teacher and leader and mentor, and really just being the visionary, right? I really take, what I've really been reminded through this conversation is that every great result, the foundation of it is built on a great vision. So I just really want to thank you for leading the charge, right? For creating this vision of alignment within the country, within the provinces, and helping to be the change. So I'm willing to walk with you, Jim. So I'm really enthused to see what happens.
Well, I'm very humbled to hear that, and thank you for that, because in the morning I only feel like I'm the great coffee drinker. So
okay. So thank you very much, Jim. And I definitely look forward to having more conversations.
Yeah, anytime. And I wish we had more time, but I've got to get off on to a call on an alignment piece right now with a few people, believe it or not. So,
hey, we'll bring you back for part 2 soon.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks,
awesome.
Jim.
Thanks.
Have a great day.